web.
Hi, Linda.
Hi. So, Edwina, I'm all in my feelings right now. So let's start from the beginning. So I watched BLINDFIRE this morning. So it's all fresh in my mind. Let's first start with, why did you decide that this was an important project to get involved in?
Yeah. I mean, for me, first of all, I was 9 months pregnant. I was just a couple of weeks away from giving birth. And in fact, I literally was giving birth while the wrap party was going on. I was in the
Oh,
hospital.
wow.
Yeah, so it was that close. And so, of course, after reading the material, I wondered, should I do this? Is it even safe to do this? Is it healthy to do this, as a pregnant woman? And at the time, they didn't even know I was pregnant. Um, but, I prayed on it as I do with pretty much everything I get involved in. And I felt like it was just so necessary as a story in relationship to where our nation is. And meanwhile, we filmed it last year. So that was before, this huge resurgence of Black Lives Matter. It was before coronavirus. We filmed it before all of this. And so, in some ways it feels very prophetic that when it's released, is released right in the middle of such a tumultuous time in our nation, in a place where we're really trying to reckon ourselves in our nation. And I feel like that movie represents that. And I think it's valuable and worth seeing, especially now.
So let's talk a little bit about BLINDFIRE. For people who haven't heard of it, how would you describe it to them?
Yeah, I mean, BLINDFIRE follows a police officer played by Brian Geraghty, who believes that he is functioning solely and completely in his office, right? He has his own personal demons, but, in general, I think he tries to do the right thing. But he gets caught up in a situation where, in subtle ways, he has to come to terms with how and why he makes the decisions that he does, and whether or not race actually informs his decisions and choices. And I have found that there are many people who feel that no, race has nothing to do with the choices I make, the decisions I make, the judgments that I make. But when there's a closer examination of that, sometimes we come to terms with things that we ourselves don't know are there. And I think that that's what happens in the film.
Yeah, so see, you're already bringing tears to my eyes. So yes, I think that this film being released in the midst of a racial reckoning in America and really across the world is going to be really important on all sides. And why I say that is because when I watched this film, seeing it from the police officer's perspective was insightful to me. And why it was insightful to me is because I would never have thought of it the way he thought of it. And that implicit bias, whether we talk about racism, but sometimes racism develops in a different way. And maybe it's just a bias that you don't realize you have. And so I don't want to wreck it for people who haven't seen that scene yet or haven't seen the movie. But that moment when he recognizes that, wait, I'm a factor in this whole situation, I think is really important because as a female and as a woman of color, that's something that I would not have thought of. Do you agree with that at all? Do you agree? Like sometimes we see it one way and it's never okay, but
Yeah.
it also gives you a moment of pause.
Yes. I feel that BLINDFIRE does a great job of helping to bring to the forefront that a lot of these issues are not as black and white
Mhm.
as we have um, perhaps preferred for them to be, right? A lot of times I think it's easier if it's cut and dry, period. This is what it is, this is what it's not, and that's it. But I think any work of art, worth watching allows you to go on a journey and allows you to ask some questions of yourselves and others. you know, and I think that this film gives space for us to be challenged, for us to be moved, for us to consider ourselves and others. Um, and I feel in all ways to be less quick to judgment as much as compassion, understanding, discernment, wisdom, you know, and if all of that ends in a judgment, right? And I won't give things away either, right, as far as the film, but what we see happen at the end, I think really does pay off on the journey as well. And it's an
Absolutely.
outcome that we rarely see in our society. And I think that if we saw that more as far as the way that Blind Fire ends, that I think it will prompt a lot more healing in our nation.
Absolutely. That right there. That right there is it. It's the fact that, okay, you know what? This thing happened. How are we moving forward with it? Right? Which is really, really important. I do want to talk about your character, Rosie, specifically, and the aftermath of losing, you know, your husband while pregnant. And we often don't look at that, the survivors, the people that are left behind to pick up the pieces. Do you want to talk about Rosie's character a little bit in this film?
Oh my goodness. You know, they're a middle class family. He's well known being a coach, and they have a nice home. They have a beautiful daughter. They have a child on the way. And I think in their world, there's a lot of peace and there's a lot to be thankful for and grateful for and expectant of, right? Including a new life, which anyone who's had a child knows, like, that is a very auspicious time.
Mm-hmm.
And so to have my husband be taken away from me in this violent way, um you know, it's almost as though there's no words, right? Like there's no words. Even if he would have died of natural causes, there'd be no words. But then to find out that he's killed by the very people that are charged with protecting us obviously gives so many other layers. And so for her as a first responder, I mean, she's a nurse, right? And we see her in that first scene kind of coming off of her shift into this new reality and trying to figure out what to do with it. But I do think that as we watch videos, you know, since then, since the time we shot it, you know, we've been able to watch these press conferences with, you know, the family of George Floyd and just so many other, the families of Breonna Taylor. And I find myself, you know, looking at them even more keenly, right? To really understand the depth of what has been taken from your life now. It's not just us, right? We feel it deeply and we don't even know the person personally.
Yeah,
So what does it mean for you and your family that this person is no longer here and no longer here in these circumstances? And I definitely, you know, I hope that the audience, you know, in considering the lens of Rosie, I hope that it will deepen those levels of compassion for those left behind as well.
absolutely. What I also loved about this film is the fact that it takes an African American family and shows that, you know, that they're not all one cookie cutter, and we're not all one stereotype. And like you said, you had two professionals with children owning their own home, you know, and minding their business, really doing something that is very American for a lot of families, watching football and, you know, going about your business. So I thought that that was, there are so many layers in Blind Fire. And I thought that was an important part of the movie to keep in your mind, because I do think that in present day and in real life, we see a lot of the stereotypes. And if you are not surrounded by multicultural, I suppose, um, you tend to only see Black people in one lens. So I thought that was a really important layer in this movie. Do you agree?
I do agree. I do agree. You know, yeah, a lot of times we think that, oh, well, I mean, that person's clearly a threat or appears to be a threat, right? Like the whole Trayvon Martin situation. Well, he had on a hoodie, but you don't know who's underneath that hoodie. The
Yeah.
person underneath that hoodie, could be a Nobel Prize winning, and there's just so many layers. And I kind of love too that Chiké in the film has tattoos, right? Like there's these things about him that if you are prone to stereotypes and to visual stereotypes that you can say, oh, that's a thug, right? That because and then having to confront your own bias. So I see
Yes.
black skin and I see tattoo and I see male, and that for me means this person is up to no good, right? And so like really having to dissect what we see, and obviously that's a big scene in the movie too, where Brian and Rosie, have that conversation at the table.
Yeah.
She says, what do you see when you see us?
Yeah. And you know what? It's so interesting that you said that because that's exactly the line I wrote down.
Mm,
And I think that that was very, very powerful for the audience. What do you see when you look at us? Like, what do you see? That's the conversation to
yeah.
start with. Because if you don't realize you have those implicit biases, then, where do we go from here?
And listen, that is all of us. I feel like as these things come to the forefront, I'm constantly asking myself this question, right? Like I see this person and that person. What are my assumptions about this person?
Yeah.
What are my assumptions about that person? And where are the places where I'm interpreting others based upon my background, what I understand to be true, what my experiences have been? And so I really think that as this topic of prejudice um, comes to the forefront in our nation, and clearly it has been certainly my whole life, and I think for generations, but we've come into deeper understandings of what that is,
Mm-hmm.
and I just hope that we will all really examine ourselves, like
Yeah.
not just point the finger, but continue to examine ourselves, and the people that we come in contact with, so we can find a way to strip all this stuff, right? All this stuff that we don't need, to
Yeah.
strip it away so that we can actually be able to behold one another as human beings
Yeah, that's right.
created in God's image, that we are brothers and sisters.
Yeah, absolutely. I did want to touch also upon um, the police aspect of it, and not so much, I don't want to call it a cover up, but I do want to call it, let's put all the puzzle pieces together for it to make sense. Because in real life, we do see a lot of that. So it was interesting for me in this film to see how they were justifying immediately without actually looking at, okay, what happened here? And so I think that that's also an important piece. Do you find that the police side of the police aspect of it was really important in this movie?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not a police officer. I haven't worked in, a police precinct. I have been on the other side of police, and I have
Mhm.
had my own experiences, and obviously know of many, 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 many more. But it does feel often like the first order of business is to defend the action and to assume that the action is in some way appropriate. And frankly, when I watch the film myself as a spectator, I do have compassion for Brian's character because he thinks he's responding to something that is completely different from what's happening, right?
Mhm.
And so when you have this whole lens, all these things together, I can understand a person would feel like they're under enormous amount of pressure. And that has come up in many interviews as well with different police that have been a variety of things. but that's why what's underneath has to be rooted out, right?
Yeah.
Because you're in a profession that is, things happen in a quick moment, a quick second. That's what you signed up for.
Yeah.
So if that's what you signed up for, you sort of have to make sure that on the inside you're ready for that, right? Or trained for that. And I'm glad that, in a lot of the conversations that are happening now politically, there's a lot of talk about this sort of retraining, as far as police and bias and all of that, because it absolutely impacts how you handle situations. There's no question.
Absolutely. So BLINDFIRE is being released November 13th in select theaters and on demand November 20th. Do we know what cities it's being released on? Because what I thought was so interesting when I saw the breakdown is during COVID, obviously a lot of the theaters have been suffering. So as an independent, I just think, wow, that's great that they're still doing that in order to support the theaters.
Yeah, me too. So on the Kandoo website, it's KANDOO dot KandooFilms.com/blindfire.
Okay.
There's a list of all the different places that are showing the movie. And in fact, to my understanding, there's also drive-in. I'm
I
really
love that.
excited about. Yeah, I'm like, oh my gosh, drive-ins. That's so amazing how this culture of drive-ins are coming back. I just love that.
Yeah.
So yeah, and there's virtual cinemas. So if anyone goes to the website, the Kandoo Films website or the BLINDFIRE website, there is a list of places where it is going to be shown live. And then there's starting November 20th is when it will begin streaming.
Wonderful. Well, I'm excited for everyone to see this movie. I'm sure you are as well. It's very, very powerful. And I think that the timing of it is just amazing. It's like
Thank
really,
you
really
so much,
amazing.
Linda.
Yeah.
Thank
So,
you.
Edwina, thank you so much. I do want to ask you what's next for you. First of all, congratulations, new mama.
Oh,
And
thank you.
what's next for you?
So actually, my family and I are in the midst of packing up to go to London for a while. So I'm beginning a new project there for Amazon.
Oh,
And
yay.
so yeah, so we are in our major transition. It's the project is filming in London and in South Africa. So I'm really excited about
Oh,
that.
how exciting. And have
Thank
you been to London before?
I have been to London before. In fact, my baby's name is London.
Oh,
And my husband named her that because he said, and of course, this was last year, he said, God is going to open up a door for us in London. And she's going to bring great joy to our family. And he named her London Joy.
oh my
And
God,
here
that
we are.
is so beautiful. All right,
It's
I'm gonna go
amazing
cry
how God
offline
works.
now. Edwina, thank you so much. I wish you all the blessings on your new adventure. And
Oh,
this is
thank
really going
you.
to be a great movie for people to see.
Thank you so much, Linda. I
Thank you.
appreciate, yeah, I appreciate our getting together today.
Yay, too.
Bye.
Bye.